In 2023, doctors in Michigan were monitoring 4 dying patients on life support. The moment the machines were turned off, something happened that nobody expected. Instead of going quiet, their brains exploded with activity, gamma waves surging at levels higher than when the patients were fully conscious and healthy. For a few seconds, the dying brain became the most alive it had ever been. Nobody can explain why, but if that's what happens when the brain is shutting down, it might explain something that humans have been reporting for thousands of years, and that scientists have been too uncomfortable to take seriously. What dying actually feels like from the inside. About 10 to 20% of people who survive cardiac arrest report the same experience. They remember floating above their own body. They remember a tunnel, a light, dead relatives waiting for them, and a feeling of peace so overwhelming that many of them didn't want to come back. For most of history, science dismissed this as hallucination, oxygen-starved neurons firing randomly, creating meaningless noise. But then researchers started actually measuring what happens inside a dying brain, and what they found was the opposite of noise. It was the most organized brain activity they had ever seen. Neuroscientist Jimo Borjagian at the University of Michigan led the team that captured those final moments in 2023. What her data showed was that in the seconds after the heart stopped, specific regions of the brain didn't just stay active. They began communicating with each other in ways that are normally associated with consciousness, memory retrieval, and vivid sensory experience. The dying brain wasn't shutting down randomly, it was doing something deliberate. That raises an uncomfortable question. If the brain is generating the most vivid conscious experience of your entire life in the seconds before death, what are you experiencing during those seconds? Here's where it gets stranger. Cardiologist Pim van Lommel spent over 20 years studying near-death experiences across hospitals in the Netherlands. He interviewed 344 cardiac arrest survivors and found that about 18% reported detailed memories from the time they were clinically dead. No heartbeat, no measurable brain activity, no response to stimuli. They were, by every medical definition, gone. And yet they came back with memories, not vague fragments. Specific, structured experiences that followed a remarkably consistent pattern across patients who had never met each other and came from completely different cultural backgrounds. They described leaving their body and watching the medical team work on them from above. Some recalled specific details, instruments used, conversations between nurses, things that happened in other rooms, details later confirmed to be accurate. They described entering darkness that gave way to a tunnel of light. They described meeting deceased family members who communicated without speaking, and nearly all of them described an overwhelming sense that everything was going to be fine. What makes this difficult to dismiss is the consistency. A 7-year-old child in Amsterdam, a 60-year-old farmer in England, and a middle-aged teacher in Ohio. None of them had ever heard each other's stories, and yet they described the same sequence in the same order, with the same emotional weight, as if the experience had a script that the brain already knew by heart. These aren't rare anecdotes from a handful of people. The AWARE study led by Sam Parnia at New York University attempted to verify these accounts scientifically. They placed hidden visual targets in hospital rooms, images that could only be seen from above, near the ceiling. The idea was simple. If patients truly leave their body, they should be able to see the targets. The results were inconclusive. Most cardiac arrests happened in rooms without targets, and the sample was too small to draw firm conclusions. But one verified case stood out. A patient accurately described events during a 3-minute period when he had 0 measurable brain function. One case doesn't prove anything, but it's enough to make the question uncomfortable. So, what's actually happening in those final moments? The neuroscience offers several explanations, and none of them are boring. The tunnel of light? Your visual cortex is shutting down, but not all at once. It dies from the outside edges inward, like a camera aperture closing. The last thing your eyes see is a shrinking circle of light in the center of absolute darkness. Your brain doesn't know it's dying. It thinks you're moving through a tunnel towards something bright. Your body dumps every painkiller it has. Endorphins flood your system as your organs fail. Some researchers believe the brain also releases DMT, the same compound found in ayahuasca, during its final moments. Neuroscientist Rick Strassman proposed this in 2001. Direct evidence in humans is still thin, but DMT has been found in the pineal glands of dying rats. If the human brain does the same thing, that would explain why so many people describe the experience as not just peaceful, but transcendent, more real than anything they experienced while alive. Your life flashing before your eyes isn't a metaphor either. During those final gamma wave surges, your hippocampus, the part of your brain that stores everything you've ever lived, appears to dump its entire archive in seconds, years compressed into a single breath. Survivors describe seeing their first day of school, their mother's face, their wedding, their child's laugh, all playing at once, layered on top of each other like 100 movies on one screen. Your brain isn't glitching. It's running one final search through every memory it ever saved, as if it's looking for something, or saying goodbye to everything. Jimo Borjigin's data suggests that the surge of activity isn't chaos. It's coordinated. The brain regions involved in consciousness, perception, and memory all fire together in a synchronized pattern that resembles, and in some ways exceeds, normal waking awareness. Some researchers have proposed that this could be the brain's last attempt at survival, marshaling every resource it has for one final push. Others argue it may be something the brain evolved to do, a mechanism designed to make the transition from life to death less terrifying. Think about what that would mean from an evolutionary perspective. If dying was pure agony with full awareness of what was happening, the psychological effect on communities would be devastating. Every death witnessed would traumatize the survivors. But if the brain could create a buffer, a final experience of peace, reunion, and light, the dying person's last moments would be bearable, and the people watching them die would see a face that looked calm rather than terrified. Evolution doesn't care about the afterlife, it cares about the living. And a peaceful death protects the mental health of everyone who has to keep surviving after you're gone. That might sound cold, but think about it from the other side. If you had to watch someone you loved die screaming in pure conscious terror, that memory would break you. It would make you afraid to hunt, afraid to fight, afraid to take the risks that survival demanded. But if the last thing you saw on their face was calm, if they looked like they were going somewhere good, you could keep going. You could keep the tribe alive. The dying brain's final act of mercy wasn't for the person dying. It was for everyone watching. Now think about ancient humans witnessing this. Someone in the tribe collapses. Their heart stops. Minutes later, they gasp back to life and describe floating above their body, seeing dead relatives entering a world of light. The tribe doesn't know about gamma waves or endorphins or the hippocampus. They only know what this person just told them. And what this person told them sounded exactly like proof that death wasn't the end. Across every continent, every culture, every era of human history, people who came back from the edge of death described the same experience. Long before anyone wrote a single word of scripture, near-death experiences may have been quietly building the foundation of every belief system humanity has ever created. Not because the afterlife is real, not because the afterlife isn't real, but because the experience is real. Whatever the brain is doing in those final seconds, the person living through it isn't pretending. They feel it with more certainty than anything they've ever felt while alive. And that might be the most unsettling part of the entire story. Not what happens after you die. Nobody knows that. But what happens right before? Because right before, your brain, the same brain that spent your whole life filtering, doubting, second-guessing, and questioning, suddenly stops doing all of that. And for the first and only time in your entire existence, it lets you believe something completely. Whether that final belief is a window into something real, or the most beautiful lie your brain has ever told, nobody alive can answer. But your brain already knows what it's going to show you. It decided a long time ago.